Māori, Indigenous, are hardwired to think about what's good for people. We're hardwired to think about what's best for our whānau, for our hapu. I was still a teenager, but I had a sense of not calling. I always felt like there was something for me to do.
Kua whakahonoretia a Traci Houpapa hei tangata whakaawe nui puta no i te ao mo āna mahi pakahi, āna mātaitanga me āna mahi whakawhana ke ohanga. He wahine Māori ia, he wahine toa hoki, e mōhio ana kei tōna pūtake ko te hiranga o tōna Māoritanga.
As a leader, the position or place of leadership means that you're not going to please all of the people all of the time. What encourages me is seeing progress for our people and seeing people being courageous in their own space. The things that I'm involved with across my portfolio is driven by that, is by how we can make things better, how we can improve on things, how we can be better.
Make it believable and keep it true.
Wahine Māori are hardwired to think about what's good for people.
I know that my lived experience can help so many others.
The photographs are a record of how divisive that period was.
I never stand up there and say I speak for all Māori.
I just thought, I'll try to do the best I could with something that I could do well. I'd like to do that.
So this way,
Yeah, he'll go. Yep. I'll tweet it later.
Traci, are you in touch? Yeah. Traci, take one.
So we are Waikato Maniapoto at Taranaki and Tūwharetoa. Those are our iwi. I call Traci a Houpapa a hau, no taumari nui, I te rohi pōtai. Here's our Whanganui River coming on this side. Some people fishing. And then our Ōngārui on the right-hand side coming along and joining up with the Whanganui, which is ahead of us. This was an important place too because of the river traffic and the connection of the riverway waterways for our communities and people. Our father was Waikato Maniapoto, Taranaki and Tūwharetoa. He was born in a field at home in Ngā Kōnui, and my mum is a second-generation Croatian German.
Oh, kia ora, sis.
Kia ora. Thank you, Traci.
I'm the eldest of four. I have a sister and two brothers, and we grew up on a farm in the King Country. Our father was a farmer and our mum was a farmer's wife, and we grew all our kai from the farm or from the orchards, or mum would cook or bake. So we grew up on a farm. We were farm kids. We used to ride our horses to school, and everyone at the school mostly were our whānau. And if there was a tangi at the pā, the school would almost close down because everyone was at the pā. It was a neat time and a neat place to grow up. And I think it set me up for what I'm doing now. I didn't know that we were Māori until one day we stayed with a friend for a weekend. We didn't often do that because their pa liked us, all the kids, to stay at home, so it was a big deal for us. And we stayed with a Pākehā family, friends, and we went out eeling. And for us tuna was kai, eels were kai. We set the lines and then we came back in the morning, we caught eels. And Melanie, my sister, and I thought this was great because we thought, kai. And then we brought them home and our friend's mum said just go and hang them in the tree, and we thought that's a bit strange, but okay. And then it wasn't until then that we realised, because we said to her, that's kai, we'll be able to have that for dinner. And she said, oh no, only Maoris eat that food. And I remember driving home and I said to Mum, what's Māori? And Mum said, you're Māori, your father's Māori.
Stories from Mum's family, the Pākehā, that there was for a moment there an issue about Mum bringing home a Māori fellow. Then they came to know Dad and loved him.
I think there were some challenges within Dad's own family about the decision he made, and the commitment he made with Mum.
You know, you have epiphanies in life and you sort of think to yourself, wow, it was the first time that I realised we were different, or had even thought we were different. I'd never thought that, I had just thought people were people. And even though Dad was, āhua Māori and Mum was āhua Pākehā, it didn't mean anything. And that stopped me and made me start to see the world differently. As you grow you're an adult and you're looking back at your life, you sort of start to think about things like that really do shape you and your characteristics and your experience of the world and what you think and how you think about things. And there have been markers like that through my life where, joined up, you start to understand how you're wired and why you do what you do and how you respond to things. So that was probably the very first time that I thought, wow, I'm Māori, and I didn't know what that meant.
Ahakoa kaori I kōrerotia te reo Māori I te kāinga o ngā Houpapa. Heoi, mai rāno I tōna tamarikitanga, I kitea te hiranga o te tiaki I te whenua.
All the other kids are outside having fun and the Houpapa kids are in a line having to listen to our dad. And we were at one hui, again, just connecting these memories and these impactful experiences that guide and create and decide or define who you are. And he was talking about how important it is to have our land returned, and we manage our own land and we decide what's happening to our own land. And I can remember looking up at him and thinking, one day I want to be like my dad.
E kuraina a Traci ki te kura tuarua o Taumaru Nui. I reira kaore ia I mōhio I te oro ia I ona pūkenga mo te ao.
Going through college and high school, we had some great teachers. So Norman Toka was magnificent. And then we had our aunties. Nan Garland was one of them, and Bunny Weldermoth. And those three people, especially Nan and Auntie Bunny, were so staunch in being Māori within a system and a time that didn't really celebrate that or encourage us to be as Māori as we could be. And they kept on keeping on. And they were strong, fierce sometimes, strong wahine who made it, the language we use now, safe for us to be Māori. They were great wahine and they were people who inspired me. I was still a teenager, but I had a sense of not calling, but I always felt like I was here to do a job. So while, my peers were doing that, I always felt like there was something for me to do. And even when I was coming to the end of my time at Taumarenui High and starting to think about what I was doing in the world, our guidance counsellor, career guidance counsellor, was a guy called Pete Wikaira. And he said to me, Traci, what do you want to do with your life? And I said, I don't know, Mr. Wikaira. And he said, I think you should go out and get as much experience as you want, as you can. E pa came home one day and said, oh, you've got a job. I said, okay. And he said, you're going to work with your auntie, or Annie Henry, at Kōhangareo. And I didn't really know who Auntie Annie was, but I didn't think anything of it. I just thought, well, okay. And then left school and started work. My job back then was, especially in the early stages, was driving the nannies around to hui, to talk about te kōhangareo, to talk about the movement, and to make sure that they had enough cups of tea and kai. Again, remember sitting there thinking to myself, these women were magnificent. Mātatau i te reo Māori, strongly anchored in whānau and whakapapa, and really thinking hard about what they were doing and what they wanted for the next generation. They were less occupied with their own conditions or their own opportunities or contracts or services. They were focused more specifically on the what and who next and the how. And I think a lot of the work that we're doing now in my portfolio in governance and leadership, I draw on those experiences, which is more around the what next, the who and the how.
Mai I te traiwa I ngā nene ki te kohi tamariki I te kōhanga, I te mata ai a Traci ki te whai I ngā tapuai o tōna matua, he kaiarahi I tōna iwi.
I got into governance by mistake. One of my very first boards was Te Uranga B2 Corporation, one of our farms at home in Taumarenui. And E pa, our dad, was a board member, a committee of management member there, and way back. He was part of an original committee that petitioned government, then Lands and Surveys, to have our land returned. And so that happened in, I think, 1981 or 1982.
Karanga maira ki o koutou moko puna koe ke mai nei rungi te tino kaupapa o te rane.
Te Uranga B2 Corporation was one of the first Māori land blocks from Lands and Survey to be returned. Ben Couch at the time said that he thought that this would be the beginning of the Māori landslide, in as much as our lands would be returned and more Māori, whānau and hapu, would seek the return of their tūpuna whenua and their tūpuna land. And so my role with Te Uranga was very much a masterclass in learning how to lead, learning how to work with your whānau, learning how to deliver an annual report every year that wasn't always about financial return, but sometimes about delivering on what the nannies wanted, which might not be commercial and which might not make any strategic sense, but in terms of whānau, whenua and whakapapa, made absolute sense.
Mā roto I ngā kōrero tuku iho me tana titiro whakamua, kua para a Traci te huarahi mō ngai Māori ki te mahitahi me te krauna.
That governance experience made me more interested in that governance leadership role, and I was asked to join more boards and more organisations and entities, more companies. And so at the time I was consulting and advising on strategy, economic development, mainly for Māori, working with hapu and iwi, as well as government at the time. And it got to the point where I needed to make a choice about whether I streamed governance and leadership and maintained that consulting role, and felt more compelled to a governance and leadership role in business, strategy and economic development. If I was describing what I do, I work with people to decide how businesses run, because we're focusing on what's best for our whānau and for our hapu and for our rohe. And so for us, we are Māori, Indigenous, are hardwired to think about what's good for people. We're hardwired to think about what's best for our whānau, for our hapu, our sub-tribes or groupings, depending on where you are born in the world as Indigenous leaders. In its most simplest form, economic development is about what's good for people.
Mō ngā tau te kau, ko hea a Traci I te Federation of Māori Authorities. Koe nei te whāngai mo te ōhanga whitu te kau piri ona tāra a te Māori.
FOMA was established in the 1980s because our leaders at the time, the late great Tahipi Te Hiuhiu and Wakavuko and others, had the sense quite rightly that Māori entities, Māori ahuwhenua, land entities, trusts and corporations, needed to achieve strategic alignment for political, economic and business leverage. So they knew that land as an asset base was going to be, or was and still is, critically important for Māori, and more importantly, critically important for Aotearoa. And they also knew then that Māori had an important role in terms of the leadership of land-based assets and interests and activities, the primary industry, for New Zealand and for Aotearoa.
Maharani ki tērana, ko timata ia I roto I te whaumara, I te ratau 2010. Ana ki tēnei wā anō, ki tēnei tau 2023 mātoru, mo tōna kaha, tōna maia, kia tū atu ki te kāwana. Ki te tautoko atu ngai tātou I roto I ngā rōpū, ngā mahi katoa mo te ohanga. Kei reira no I o tātou whānau, kia tū atu ngā whare, ngā mahi o ngā pāmu, ngā mahi o ngā I roto I ngā ngahere, kei roto I te moana, kei reira no I a tātou katoa. Me tētai anō I roto I te mata hiko anoki, kei rano I a tātou, me te rei anō o tātou whānau mahi anu I roto I ngā toi Māori.
Don't underestimate what she's been able to contribute. I think the fact that she's been able to take control as chair of a huge enterprise like Landcorp, and there was a time where we were going to sell Landcorp. You know, Traci's demonstrated that with a good board and very good leadership, this can be a thriving set of enterprises and contribute significantly.
As a leader, the position or place of leadership means that you're not going to please all of the people all of the time. And so from time to time, I am criticised for decisions, for my leadership. I should have, could have or might have done differently or better. I could be more Māori or less Māori. I could be more wahine or less wahine. And I think at the end of the day, my job is to deliver.
Kua wai tohua e Waikato Tainui me te karauna, tētahi whakaaetanga hou mo te awa o Waikato. Ko te tino ia o te whakaaetanga hou nei, he whakapakari ake I ngā whakahaerenga e pāna ki te awa, me te whakarauiri I te wai oroto.
The Waikato River Authority was a visionary concept that came at the right time because of the people and the leaders around the table. Over this last 10 years, and I was the Deputy Crown Co-Chair for the Waikato River Authority, alongside of the late, great John Luxton. And what we were able to do together is gain a better understanding of one another, both sides, understand that the Waikato and its tributaries is as important to all of us for different reasons, that as tangata whenua, as mana whenua, we have a higher duty of care because of our whakapapa and our whānau, and working alongside of our river community, our local government, alongside of our councils and so forth, meant that we have been, in my opinion, able to achieve better outcomes, more sustainable, smarter outcomes.
The Whanganui River and Waikato Authority are very good examples where Māori and Pākehā standing together, making decisions about the future management of that asset, because both have a demonstrated common interest that is material. There's no question, that's a very good model.
I started working with government and the Crown, firstly in a consulting advisory role. I was a member of the Guardians Establishment Committee and started out there on the Crown side, so that made for some challenging conversations. From time to time, we would separate out as the Guardians Establishment Committee, and Crown would have a chat about things, and Māori, the River Iwi, would deliberate as well. And sometimes I was asked to sit out of those conversations because of my whakapapa that connected me to the awa, and also because at that time some people thought that I may be conflicted.
As an Indigenous woman, working in a space of leadership and governance. And leadership is around, I'm going to keep moving forward. I'm going to carry people with me. I am committed to the future, honouring the past. There are few people with both the Indigenous connection, the mana accumulated through her own efforts and performance, but also her skills acumen, which she has built herself. You know, she's a wonderful example of understanding how to fill the toolbox to enable yourself to then be the change maker.
Kua ārahi a Traci I te aranga o ngā reo o te wāhine ki roto I te whutupōro. Kaua ki runga I te papa, engari ki roto hoki I ngā tūranga teitei, ko ia anake te kai whakahaere wahine I ngā Chiefs.
I was asked to join the Chiefs board about 3 or 4 years ago. Women's rugby has always been part of our family. I was interested in their directorship because at the time I knew that the Chiefs were making a commitment to wahine, to women's rugby. The fact that family is important to them and our kawa and tikanga as Māori is important to us. We were one of the first to ensure that our players, our mamas, could bring their kids and their little pepe to training and to camps as well. And that's all Chiefs. That's what we're about, and that makes it real for me. One of the things that our wahine must be recognised for, especially in this professional era, is that they have the same remuneration packages and the same pay arrangements and contract conditions as our tāne. And we're seeing that play out in other domestic competitions internationally. England, Wales are already there. Aotearoa needs to follow suit.
I te tau 2012, I tohua a Traci ki te tohu New Zealand Order of Merit mo ana mahi I roto I ngā pakehi me ngai Māori. I te tau 2016, I tapa a BBC I aia ki te rārangi o ngā wāhine whakaaweawe o te ao.
When I got the letter, I cried. And I thought less about myself and more about the korau and kuia who had trusted me with their time, who had generously shared their visions with me. I was at once grateful that my work could be recognised in this way because I felt like I was able to deliver on their expectations. And also at once just so sad that they weren't here to see that.
Well, it's wonderful to be acknowledged by your peers and the Queen to acknowledge you and you know, it's always a reflection of others who've seen something in you that they view as special. And Traci absolutely deserved that recognition. I think to be acknowledged as a change maker at a global level speaks even further to her capacity.
I sat and thought about how I could do things better, about how everything that I had experienced and lived and learned, you know, the successes and my failures had brought me to that point. And then it felt for me like a reset. It felt that I needed to up my game.
Ahakoa ana e ke ngā Pakehi umanga hoki, mo Traci ko tōna whānau tana tino taonga pui pui aki I tēnei ao.
Whānau for me is everything. My whānau are the reason I can do what I do and are the reason I do what I do. And without my brothers and my sister and my mum, I simply wouldn't be the leader that I am. They remind me of what's important. They remind me that I am not flash and that I've got a role to play in the family. It is a good day for it, eh? Nice weather. So I have had Tūmanako since he was 2 days old through Oranga Tamariki. We share whakapapa and we are whānau, and he has been a delight. I thought when I accepted Tūmanako that I would be giving him a home and that I would be supporting him, and I have learnt very quickly, even from a very young age, that he's been a great teacher, a great supporter, and a great confidant. What encourages me is seeing progress for our people. That encourages me. And seeing people being courageous in their own space. And for some, that's being a good wife or a husband or a partner. It might be a good mama, a good papa, and that's the most important thing.
Ai honore nui tēnei ki te kōrero e pāne ki toku hua a peripono a Traci. He wahine kaha, he wahine maia ia. He mama, he wahine tautoko anu ki tōna whānau. He wahine tūpono ia ki ngā kaupapa. He honori nui tēnei kiau.
Leadership that is required now to navigate these uncertain times requires us to think more about our people, to think about our environment, and then to make decisions in the long term, which requires a stronger and better collaboration and cooperation. And that means sometimes we need to think about what we need to compromise on and what we are prepared to give away, because the investment in the greater good and return is better for our people.